Let's cut to the chase, have an honest conversation, and develop real answers. As a matter of fact, with Andrew Cuomo. Hello, welcome back to As a Matter of Fact. I'm Andrew Cuomo, and the topic today is migrants. Migrants on the southern border. They just keep coming and coming and coming. Now, I know what you're thinking. More information on the migrants. Forget it. I'm already oversaturated. But like many topics today, the news has covered the politics of the migrant issue and has covered the sensationalism of the issue. But I don't think there has been an honest discussion so we really understand the consequences of what we're dealing with. We haven't even begun to come to grips with the magnitude of this situation. It's beyond Democrats and Republicans jockeying for political position. It's beyond campaign stunts like sending migrants on a plane to Martha's Vineyard. This is serious, and this is here to stay. Now, there's an assumption that it is a short-term problem. That's wrong. This is a 2, 3, 4, 5-year, tens of billions of dollars, 2 million plus people problem. It is a problem that can tip over our nation's cities that are already on the brink. It's a problem that will further the social divide and the racial tension. It is a problem that will further the loss of trust in this country's government as once again it appears lost and incompetent. It is a problem that will further cleave the Democratic and Republican divide. And that's as a matter of fact. So let's look at it. We are now approaching 2 million migrants. Why the dramatic increase? Several factors converge. First, COVID increased the economic problems in countries like Nicaragua and El Salvador and Mexico and Venezuela. At the same time, political persecution and criminal enterprises increased. And this drove people to leave their country for, quote unquote, the promise of America. Second, everyone heard President Biden reversed President Trump's policy. And many took it as an invitation to come to the southern border and cross into America. I have met with migrants who journeyed for 3 months to get to the border because they believed it was open. Third, the exception became the rule. What does that mean? In 1981, the United States passed the Refugee Act, essentially allowing asylum for victims of political persecution in their home country. It's a formal process requiring a hearing and proof. But it was a small program. In 2015, it only granted about 8,000 asylum applications. However, the benefit to the program was that you could stay in the United States pending the determination. And that benefit was everything. And the program has now exploded. Immigrants are not presenting themselves for citizenship. They are claiming asylum. The individuals are supposedly tracked for their location in the United States until their hearing. And the hearing can take several months to years to actually occur. Migrants I have spoken to said that they were told that it would take about 2 years for them even to have their hearing, given the backlog. Now, during that period, they are here legally, and they are given cash assistance for about 8 months, roughly $2,000 to $3,000, depending on the size of the family. But they cannot work, at least for the first several months, and we must provide housing, food, shelter, medical, school, etc. And remember, this entire system is premised on the fact that the federal government can locate the migrants when it's time for their hearing. And then that the federal government can actually conduct 2 million amnesty hearings, each one with attorneys and judges and court officers and hearing rooms. Okay, so that's the problem. What's the solution? What do we do? First order of business is to slow or stem the tide at the border. Now, Biden says he's doing everything he can, and Washington debates this every day. Biden, ironically, is now being criticized for basically reversing himself to the point that he has returned to the Trump position. But I don't want to get into the politics and the back and forth. Theoretically, the new procedures that are now in place should make a difference. If, always an if the new policies are enforced, if the border is secure, if our efforts to stabilize the situation in their home countries makes a difference, and if the federal bureaucracy can actually get it done. Second, we already have a problem that poses a long-term serious threat. Even if another migrant didn't come into this country, we are already in grave danger. We have migrants being shipped from city to city. The federal tracking system is very poor, and I guarantee we're going to lose many of these migrants over the next several months. To say the least, this is a massive logistical operation to house and feed this larger population for years. We have been approaching it as if it was a temporary effort, that this was going to be over in a few weeks or a few months. That is just plain wrong. And the efforts to address it as a temporary situation will fail, because this is not a temporary problem. Gymnasiums, motels, hotels, shelters, college dorms, forget it. You can't keep families in these accommodations for years. A family can't live in a motel room. We are approaching this as a short-term problem when it's anything but, and we have to face the facts. Given the scale, given the lack of efficiency of the federal government, we need a plan that accommodates this population for years. That's what we should be assuming. Here's my suggestion. 3 points. First, save our cities. Save our cities. This cannot be a problem that we continue to lay at the doorstep of our cities. Look around. Our cities are already on the brink. San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York City, Chicago. We are in the midst of an urban crisis. Post-COVID, remote work threatens the existence of cities. You can live anywhere and work from anywhere. The current increase in crime, the homelessness, the reduction in the quality of life in our cities, these are serious threats to urban America. And then we have additional tax burdens if you want the pleasure of living in a city. Many of our cities have cold weather. That can be avoided by moving south. You shovel snow. I'm getting a suntan. These are real factors determining where people live, again, especially post-COVID. We may as well be forcing people to leave urban America. To now add another level of extraordinary difficulty to our big cities is one of the all-time dumb mistakes. And even more incredible, cities have the least legal liability in this matter. This is not their constitutional obligation. It is first a federal function, and then it is a state function. But it is not the responsibility of a mayor. These governors, who are effectively forcing the cities to manage the problem, this is a dereliction of their duty. The state must take charge. Los Angeles is not a sanctuary city. California is a sanctuary state. Los Angeles doesn't process immigration claims. The federal government does. Los Angeles doesn't allocate needs and resources across the state. Sacramento does. That's a state government function. New York is not a sanctuary city. It is a sanctuary state. How can you expect Mayor Adams in New York City to transport migrants and distribute them all across the state? How is that his job? How does his job now extend beyond the boundary of the city? Where is the state government, which for years gave speeches lauding their sanctuary status? Every legislator loved to stand up and give the Statue of Liberty speech that New York was the sanctuary state. Well, you know what? Talk is cheap. States must take responsibility. It is a state constitutional obligation. Let the governor and the state legislature pass a policy managing the current population across the entire state. If the state legislature won't do it, let the governor do it by executive order. And look at what is happening in the absence of state control. All these local governments, county governments, are now passing executive orders, stopping their hotels and motels from offering housing to the migrants from New York City. Why? Because once one county did it, every county almost had to do it, right? The political pressure that would be felt by the county that did not prohibit migrants, which would now cast that county as implicitly inviting migrants, that would be politically very difficult for that local county executive. So once one county did it, it then spread like fire through dry grass. Every county had to do it, because if you didn't do it, then it suggested you were actually inviting migrants to join your county. I believe the executive orders barring hotels and motels from accepting immigrants are illegal if New York State brings an action, or any state for that matter. So why aren't states taking control? You know why. The state officials are afraid because this is politically fraught. It's NIMBY on steroids. But you know what? It's too late. You wanted the job. You got it. Now do it. No one will be happy, but fairness is hard to argue with. Proportionality works. Let the state say we're going to fairly distribute the migrant population across the state based on the population in the state. By the way, for some of the smaller communities who right now are fighting tooth and nail to keep the migrants out of their county, this could actually be a source of income and activity for communities that are being depopulated. The states will have to help with financing for schools and local healthcare systems. But the bottom line is governors must take control in their own states. This situation, this state of chaos must end. Someone must lead. It starts with the president, and then it's the governor. But it is not the mayors. Second point, once we acknowledge that this population will be here for years, and some may be here forever if their asylum claim is granted, and we realize that hotels, motels, college dormitories, these are not the answer. We need permanent solutions. We learned this lesson before. We learned this lesson back in the 80s in welfare hotels and homeless hotels, the Martinique Hotel, the St. George Hotel, when homeless people started to present themselves, and we conned ourselves into believing that this was a short-term problem, and we'd put them in hotels or motels, and miraculously they would find housing within a matter of weeks or months. It didn't work. And to put people in hotels, motels, and for them to live there in these very crowded situations, which frankly violated even the health and safety codes, because people would be cooking on hot plates that they would be plugging into the walls. It created very bad situations in these hotels and motels, and they became notorious. You can't live, cook, and raise children in a motel room. We need affordable housing. And you know what? We needed to build affordable housing anyway. We have been unable to build affordable housing at any scale near our need for decades, only because our own government and political inertia are the obstacles. When we talk about roles and responsibilities, the federal government has always been primarily responsible for affordable housing. The federal government promised safe, clean, decent housing for every American. They did that almost 100 years ago. They never lived up to that promise. But it is a federal responsibility. Now, affordable housing is not a mystery. I built thousands of units of housing when I ran a not-for-profit in my 20s. When I was HUD secretary, we built and rebuilt communities all across the country. We're talking about building housing. We're not talking about shuttles to Mars here, right? We're not even talking about self-driving cars. This is bricks and mortar. The only degree of difficulty is managing government and having the political will to deal with the community opposition and NIMBY. Now, you would be amazed at how powerful NIMBY is, especially in this political environment where politicians begin afraid. They're afraid of the level of emotion that people have. NIMBY will always exist. If you pick a site to build in the middle of the desert, there will be a group called Save the Sand that will be formed to oppose the development. And then a few weeks later, there'll be another group called Save the Sand Lizard. And then a few days later, there'll be another group called Save the Sand Flea that lives next to the sand lizard. It is always the way. Change creates anxiety. Change creates opposition. There was community opposition when I went to build LaGuardia Airport. There was community opposition when we went to build the new Long Island Railroad track, new Moynihan Station, new airports upstate. I've never built a housing complex where there wasn't NIMBY. But once you're done, wow, historic, magnificent, beautiful. That is the way. When the public first hears about the plan, they're skeptical, and for good reason. They're skeptical about government's ability and capacity to do it, and they believe if government is going to do something like this, they're going to make a mistake and they're going to make a bad situation worse. So they oppose it initially. You have to fight through that opposition. Take the time, sit down, talk to the community, alleviate as many concerns as you can, answer the questions, be present. But despite all that, they're still going to be anxious because of the uncertainty. You have to work your way through that, and you have to get it done. So, build the housing. Use this crisis as an opportunity to invest in America once again and build. Next question is, how do we build? Every city has a public housing authority. They are existing government entities with rules and regulations, with staff, and they have land. These public housing authorities should be fully funded and energized. President Biden, it starts with him. This whole issue starts with him. He should begin to recognize the federal responsibility by providing funding to HUD, Department of Housing and Urban Development, to then pass on to the local public housing authorities. If you create more affordable housing, it will reduce the pressure on the system. And then there will be more vacancies for migrants. There are about 1 million public housing units in this country. New York City, about 180,000 units under the New York City Public Housing Authority. The largest public housing authority in the United States is in New York. When I was at HUD, we did magnificent things with public housing authorities. Modernizing, diversifying. We took housing authorities that were real problems, like Chicago Housing Authority with Cabrini Green and Robert Taylor Homes, which was notorious in the nation, and we rebuilt it. This can be done. We know how to do it. The federal government can also fund the Section 8 program, which is a mobility program, a voucher program. The federal government should fund the tax credit program that provides the private sector an incentive to actually build. So, create more public units, more Section 8 vouchers to rent private units, more tax credits to build private units. This is also a great opportunity to turn lemons into lemonade. With all that's going on, we have another problem. We have massive vacancies in our cities in commercial buildings. Post-COVID, companies are doing business differently, not just from a different geography, but they're doing it differently, and many of them are reducing the space they require, and that's leaving vacancies in commercial space. What do you do with all the vacancies in these commercial buildings? It poses a real financial problem. You could have commercial buildings defaulting. You could have the banks that hold that paper, or the insurance funds, or the REITs that hold that paper defaulting. What can you do with that vacant commercial space, which also needs to be filled for that urban environment to flourish? let's take the opportunity to convert the vacant commercial space to residential. Change the zoning, change the building codes, do what you have to do. You won't be able to do it in every application, but many applications you can. And provide more affordable housing that way. We can do it. We've done it before. Third point, the migrants are going to be here for a while. We're going to be paying the costs, hotel, food, school, health care. Under the current rules, they can't work for at least the first several months. After the first several months, they can apply for a federal permit. I guarantee there's going to be a logjam on those federal permits because the scale is so large. So, what are the migrants supposed to do in the meantime? What are they supposed to sit on the bed for 6, 8, 9 months? Let them work. Let them help the economy. Let them pay taxes. Let them model good behavior for their families. Let them become assimilated to the United States, and some of them are going to wind up United States citizens. And if the federal government can't figure out how to create temporary work permits quickly, pending asylum hearings, let the states do it. If I were governor, I would establish a state temporary work program, issue the visas, design a model state-driven program for the federal government. Just do it. The federal government would love to delegate the responsibility to the states. The federal government has more than their hands full. But put people to work in the private sector, even in the public sector. The expression states are the laboratories of democracy. Those laboratories need to work and need to work now, especially with this federal government. Let the states lead the way on work programs for this migrant population that actually benefits them and the overall economy. Last point, we need an attitude adjustment. Oh, this is such a terrible problem. You know what? In the scheme of things, no, it's not. This is not a disease that we can't cure. It's not global warming that we can't reverse. It's not global warfare. We can do this. We can manage this. We can build housing. We can allocate people among different cities and towns. We can employ people. This nation has done great things somewhere along the way. We've lost our sense of capacity and confidence. We won 2 world wars. 16 million Americans fought in World War II. 9 million Americans during Vietnam. Imagine all the logistical support that had to be managed immediately to make all those things happen. We built the Empire State Building in 1 year, the tallest building at the time. 1 year. We have tremendous capacity. Take on this challenge and use our energy in a positive way rather than all this negativity. If you want to have a political argument about the migrants, fine, knock yourself out. Point fingers, blame. You're red shirt, I'm blue shirt. But we are where we are, and we need to handle where we are today. And none of what we're doing is actually productive. We're spending billions of dollars on all sorts of temporary measures that are going to amount to nothing. Confront the problem. Honestly. Allocate responsibility. accomplish the task. That's America. That's who we are. That's what made us great. And maybe this is an opportunity to remind ourselves exactly how good we can be when we stop fighting each other and we actually focus on a common goal. Think about it. Thank you.